Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks for being with us today for our webinar programs update. It's by the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, Department of Defense, Division of the Department of Defense. My name is Tim Hines. I'm the Executive Director of the University Economic Development Association. We'll start today just by giving you some brief introductory remarks about UEDA, who we are, what we're all about, and then we'll get into today's presentation. The University Economic Development Association connects our members, which include higher education institutions, private sector businesses, and economic development organizations, all three of those audiences. We connect those members to resources that facilitate economic growth within their communities. Our members represent those who are on the cutting edge of modern economic development. As we all know, our economy has evolved rapidly, especially within the past 12 months, into an entity that behaves much differently than its predecessors, and that requires some added support, and that's what UEDA tries to provide. Success in our modern economy is all about innovation and entrepreneurship. It's about fostering talent in young people from preschool through life to embolden them and think and create outside the traditional academic or professional requirements. It's about creating new environments that attract those people who want to make and do things in new ways and retain the talent to start that process all over again in the new generation. So it's very important for academia, private sector, economic stakeholders, of course, to rely on one another to create that economic opportunity. It's never been more important. And our members really work together to expand that opportunity within their communities and regions, leveraging those aspects of talent innovation in place, and then also recognizing and promoting the interconnectedness of each of those elements. The University Economic Development Association connects our members with a lot of member benefits as well. And we have those listed on the screen. It's all about best practices within the UEDA circle. And we try to use our news, our awards program, and a lot of the programming that we do to support those efforts. You can get started today if you aren't already a member in UEDA by visiting the website that's noted on the screen, join.universityeda.org. You can also reach out to me directly. My information's on the website, and I'd be happy to sit and talk with you about the benefits of membership and how UEDA can help your institution. I also wanted to invite you to our UEDA networks. The UEDA networks provide a collaborative forum for online and face-to-face and regular engagement around topics that are critical to our profession and into the regions we serve. There's two ways to participate in the UEDA networks. There's monthly convenings that are casual, semi-facilitated sessions where like minds gather to discuss news, challenges, best practices, metrics, resources, and more. These convenings are open to the public, so you don't have to be a UEDA member. But UEDA members who do register for the network meetings are also automatically added to the online workspace, which is the second way to participate, which is a member-only workspace. Those are online forums where users can post questions to the practitioner community, upload and share resources, and collaborate on topics. And workspaces, like I mentioned, are available to UEDA members. We have a network and a workspace for each of the areas of talent innovation in place. Those are listed on the screen for you, and you can find more on our website. And you can also reach out to me, and I'll be happy to direct you to those networks. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our upcoming conference in October. It seems like far away, but in reality, it isn't. For those of you who have planned events, you know that we're in the thick of developing our agenda. You can find and get alerts on that at summit.universityeda.org. And the summit brings together national experts in leveraging college and university resources for greater economic development and community impact. These experts work within higher education, private sector, economic development organizations, government agencies, research centers, and those who partner with higher education economic development efforts. This year, we're going to be in San Antonio, and the dates are October 9th through the 12th, and we'll have lots of networking with peers, high-quality presentations, engaging discussions, all leading to drive positive change within your organization, within your institution, and within your community. We will also be holding an Economic Accelerator Day as part of our ARNI project on that Sunday, that October 9th, where we'll focus on topics of the University Center program, the EDA University Center program, economic resiliency and economic equity. So keep those dates on your calendar. Registration is now active, and we'd love for you to join us at that event. Before I introduce today's speaker, I'll talk a little bit about the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. It's a field activity within the Department of Defense and provides technical financial assistance to states and communities that are invested in the defense mission. They really focus on supporting the readiness and resiliency of both defense installations, but also the communities in which to support those defense installations. You can find more at www.oldcc.gov. And I will introduce today's speaker, who is Mr. Daniel Glasson. Mr. Glasson has been with OLDCC since 2006 and serves as the Deputy Director for Community Investment and the Acting Deputy Director for Community Adjustment. In this role, he ensures the effective and compliant delivery of OLDCC programs of assistance across its stakeholders. And previously, he served as OLDCC's Program Director for Community Investment, a project manager, and as a Presidential Management Fellow. Daniel, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Just a sound check to make sure that the technology is all working. You can hear me?
Sounds great.
All right. Well, first and foremost, I want to say I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief today to you and your members. UEDA is definitely not a new entity for the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. Actually, for the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, it might be, but for the former Office of Economic Adjustment, which was the former name of OLDCC, it was not. I also want to say by introduction that I'm an alum of the University Center program, previously with the University of Michigan, so I'm quite familiar with UEDA's work. As several who are probably on this webinar know, we are also supporters of several institutions at the university level that provide assistance to communities. So just a lot of appreciation for what this organization does and how its members support both OEA's and now OLDCC's mission, but also those communities that are impacted. Just to provide a little more overview over OLDCC is the precursor of the Office of Economic Adjustment was founded in 1961 as a field activity within the Secretary's office, which means that we spend most of our time working with communities out in the field. We provide technical and financial assistance. It's authority that is based in U.S. code. So that means if we determine that an entity, rather a community, meets an eligibility threshold that is in our U.S. code, we can provide financial assistance without them having to compete for a grant. So it's eligibility-based, non-competitive, discretionary assistance. Very recently, we've worked with UEDA for assistance to communities and to regions, to states associated with defense impacts from reductions in defense spending, from workforce impacts associated with the defense industry base. And I think that's going to be where I'm going to probably focus many of my comments today. That said, I do want to focus on two of our specific programs, which I'll get to in just one moment. But to kind of round out that thought, we do continue to provide quite a bit of assistance to entities that are working with the defense manufacturing base, and specifically to Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers within that base to ensure that they are responsive to the needs of the department and frankly are competitive for the many procurement activities and contracting activities that may be available out there. Apart from our work on the defense industry base and with the supply chains, we have a number of other programs that are associated with either defense real estate, so assisting installations to ensure that they can jointly plan with their localities to ensure that the localities have a viable economic base, but also can maintain the health, safety, and general welfare of those populations. At the same time, allowing those installations to train and to ensure that they are ready for the needs of the national defense. If I had to kind of start with two areas of emphasis that we're discussing quite a bit right now, they would be first and foremost resilience. That was a term that I heard you say as you provided your opening remarks. You mentioned economic resilience, which is something that we certainly look at as well, but we also look at the resilience of installations associated with the dynamic changes that have been brought about by a changing climate. So where people may have heard about OLDCC recently, maybe in the space associated with defense community infrastructure, and ensuring that the infrastructure that's out there that bases rely upon is resilient to those changes in climate. But the specific area where I wanted to start would be to talk about our Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, which is the next slide. The timing of this webinar is good, but at the same time a little bit perilous if you are an entity out there that's looking at this and saying, hey, that sounds like a great funding opportunity. I should think about applying for that program. And I would encourage you to think about that, but I would also say that the proposal deadline for this year's Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time today. So you have a lot of work to do in the next couple of hours if you're going to get a proposal in. But to talk a little bit about the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, this is a program that we received authorization to carry out. It's a competitive program. That authorization was received in 2019 in the National Defense Authorization Act. And really the focus of this program is ensuring that we're supporting long-term community investments that strengthen the national security innovation and expand the capabilities of the defense industrial ecosystem. And what it does is it recognizes that that's a mission that can only be accomplished by a number of different entities. And so this is a program that's been devised to try and incentivize organizations to work with different partners in those regions for that sort of a partnership, a collaboration. Those institutions would include higher education, they would include state entities, local or tribal governments, nonprofit or private nonprofit institutions, but would it also importantly engage with some of the other defense manufacturing innovation institutes that are out there. So if you look at the notice of funding opportunity that is still out there for this year's competition, you'll see that that lead organization that would be the one that would be applying for this, you would be asked to ensure that not only do you have a representative group from some of those different partners that I just mentioned, but you also are working closely with an existing defense innovation group that's out there to ensure that your collaboration can really result or really represents a leveraging of the many different entities that have experience, skills, and know how to innovate our defense industrial base. I would focus that there are a couple of areas where we are asking for emphasis this year in terms of proposals. Those include biotechnology, hypersonics, kinetic capabilities, energy storage and batteries, casting and forgings, microelectronics, submarine and shipbuilding workforce. The Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program really is a two-step process. And so when you submit a proposal, first and foremost, you'll be reviewed based on the merits of that proposal, but you'll be reviewed as for designation as a defense manufacturing community, a DMC. And if you receive that designation, you will then be eligible for a funding award. And we will make funding awards at about the $5 million level up until the money that has been appropriated that year is expended. So this year, we have $30 million. So we anticipate making about six $5 million awards for DMCSP projects. Now, if you are looking at this and maybe you're not quite there as a manufacturing community, but you have broad capabilities to work with your local or regional industrial base, you're interested in providing assistance to those small or medium-sized manufacturers, or you're specifically concerned about maybe an over-reliance of local economies on defense spending, we are emphasizing diversification as an area where we're asking communities to pay a particular focus, and people can expect that we will release a notice of funding opportunity for our eligibility-based non-competitive program probably towards the end of the fiscal year, if not a little bit later before the end of the calendar year, that does highlight some of the thoughts that we have about the diversification program. So specifically, we're looking for communities that have done a little bit of number crunching. They understand what portion of their gross regional product comes from defense spending, which is a little bit easier to do at the tier 1 level. In other words, at the large prime contracting level, than it is to do at the tier 2 or tier 3 subcontracting level, where you may not know that you have a number of firms that are participating in a larger defense supply chain. But we're also looking for communities that understand kind of the percentage of their labor force that participates in some of that, either those defense supply chains or just broadly in activities that are paid for by the Department of Defense. And with that information, we would look to invest in projects that are looking at the potential impacts associated with efforts by the department to modernize, both from the standpoint of weapons systems, but also from the standpoint of are there any other contracting that we undertake that supports the broader national mission. So a couple of opportunities upcoming here, and then certainly we hope to continue with the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program through next fiscal year, although this is a program that we will carry out each fiscal year based on what is appropriated by Congress. So let's go to the next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit here about the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, which is a pilot program. But before I do, I just wanted to say I did not produce a whole lot of slides because what I did want to try and do was leave some time for questions and answers, either that being through reading from the chat or people actually using microphones. It's a little bit old-fashioned, but I do really enjoy the interaction with crowds and with participants. So if we do have that opportunity, certainly welcome those questions. But this is going to be one of my last slides before that opportunity, so just to get people ready in case they want to compose their questions. Getting back to the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, we call it DCIP, the acronym, a 10-year pilot program, so that means it expires in 2028. It was approved in also the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, but the fiscal year 2020 was the first year that we carried out that program. This year is the third year that we have carried out this program, and again, like the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, it is a competitive program. The focus of Defense Community Infrastructure is to look for projects that are proposed that address deficiencies in community infrastructure that are supportive of military installation, so they enhance either the military value or installation resilience or military family quality of life at a local installation. Eligible applicants are state or local governments, and there's a specific definition for community infrastructure, which is pretty broad. So it would be a community support facility, such as a school, hospital, police station, fire station, emergency response center, as well as utility infrastructure projects. Over the past 2 years, we've made 29 of these awards. The fiscal year 20 competition, there were 16 awards, and then last year, the fiscal year 21 competition, there were 13 awards. We just closed this year's proposal deadline yesterday, actually on the 18th. We received, I believe, 102 proposals. So we are in the process of starting to screen those proposals for eligibility, sufficiency, making sure that they met the requirements of the funding opportunity. And over the next couple of weeks, they will be passed to a review panel to score that will ultimately end in a ranked list that will be proposed to our Assistant Secretary for Defense for Energy Installations and Environment for approval as a final rank list, and then entities will be invited to submit actual grant applications. But if you're looking for grant opportunities that are associated with resilience, this is not our only grant opportunity. We also have a non-competitive eligibility-based grant application program that we call our Installation Resilience Program. That one is non-competitive, and likewise, it is meant to assist communities that are working with local installations to evaluate the capabilities that they have and the infrastructure that they have that's supportive of those local installations to make plans to mitigate potential impacts from a changing climate. And the eligible recipients for those grants would be state or local governments or instrumentalities of government. We are unable through our authorization to provide assistance to private institutions, but as many of the members of UEDA would know, state entities such as state institutions of higher education, higher learning, those are entities that are eligible to receive our funding, and we've been very happy to support them over the many years that we've been undertaking some of these grants. Broadly, that's OLDCC in a nutshell. We have about 12 to 14 program activities, grant-making institution. We provide a lot of technical assistance. So before we go out and we make any grants, we spend quite a bit of time in those communities with those institutions that would provide an application. We assign project managers to work with you, and several of the UEDA members that may be on this call may even have had me as a project manager previously. So we look forward to continue doing that over the next couple of fiscal years, and as the Department of Defense continues to evaluate what are the needs of defense communities, ensuring that both those communities and the department can be efficient and effective in what they respectively seek to do. So with that, Tim, I'm going to kind of pause and see what the questions are out there, and see where there are some opportunities for me to provide some points of emphasis.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it. Yeah, and you mentioned in the first opportunity, Defense Innovation Group. Can you define that? Maybe give some examples of the kinds of entities that you're looking for that you define as a defense innovation.
Well, I mean, so there may be some existing entities that are out there that are, that are maybe working with institutions of higher education or local economic development entities. Maybe they're working on workforce development. I think where the innovation comes in is how they reach out to those firms, how they put together a plan to converge those different entities to produce an effective partnership. And what I would probably characterize as innovative would be some of those entities that have received some of those Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program grants in the past, over the past 2 years. So those would be entities that may be focusing on new technologies, leveraging some of the outputs that are coming from those innovation institutes that the Department of Defense seeded and funded. Maybe they're working on workforce. Maybe they're working on workforce in advance of potential local impacts that would be dislocation impacts. But it also would be based on, I think, some of those areas that I highlighted where the department knows we have interest in kind of seeing what are the innovations that the private sector or consortia comprised of the private sector and the public sector could come up with. So again, biotechnology, hypersonics, kinetic capabilities, energy storage and batteries, casting and forging, so on and so forth. So it's a little bit of a moving target, but I guess the purpose of the DMCSP program is to encourage people to take a look at that, to try and survey what's already going on out there, what are the institutions in their community that they're doing, and to come up with some good ideas for how they can partner with other entities to go beyond that.
Thanks. Yeah, and as you mentioned about the Q&A, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A function, or if you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to call on you and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. What are some of the greatest deficiencies that you've seen in proposals for funding, and UEDA is an organization of best practices and a learning environment. So I would just like to see how we can improve, as those submitting projects. So, can you pinpoint any deficiencies that you've seen for things not getting funding that may contribute or impact how folks apply?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would characterize it as deficiency so much, but I'll say that I have a couple of observations with regard to where some of our past recipients of funding have kind of tripped up. And I'd say the first place that I would start would be, somewhere between overambition and just a fundamental understanding of grant terms and conditions, and I'm not going to say the difficulties, but just the requirements associated with carrying out this funding. And so, I mean, to undertake let's say a $5 million program over 5 years, that may not sound like a lot of money, $1 million a year, but it's quite an ambitious undertaking. And so what we've observed is that there may sometimes be a disconnect between the scopes that are proposed, the appetite for those program activities to undertake an engagement with communities, to focus on certain technical areas, and then just the realities of how difficult it can be to undertake that. To put certain instruments in place that describe what a legal relationship may be. So like memoranda of agreements or understanding between institutions so that they can operate together. The financial requirements for a lead organization to be a fiscal agent on a federal grant, the reporting that's required associated with that. But then even when you get outside of kind of the administration of those grants, if you're wanting to work with a workforce, that's great. You still have to get people to participate. And that outreach is critical. And so one of the things that we say about the Defense Community Infrastructure Program is when people ask, what are the tips that we provide? Well, the first tip that we have is to have a good relationship with your local installation. So that as those communities outreach and seek to identify some projects that may be supportive or enhancing that local installation, they know whom to talk to. They have a familiarity with some of the challenges that that installation may already identify. And I would say the same on the defense manufacturing, kind of the defense industrial base side. Do you know who the primes are in your area? How familiar are you with those subcontractors? And what are their needs? Broadly, when I was working more in the project management space, one of the main challenges I think that a lot of regions had with regard to competitiveness and even diversification was start with identifying who the subcontractors were, those tier 2, tier 3 subcontractors that participate in defense supply chains, and two, really how much of a challenge they had finding people just to train on certain machines, who had even just the soft skills to show up every day. And so, thinking through, I guess, some of the finer details of that were challenging, particularly at the project conceptualization phase, where everyone liked the idea, but when you start to carry it out, you realize that it was a little bit more difficult. So that'd be one of the main observations, I guess, I would offer there.
And we have a couple of opportunities that you've shared here that, are right up against the deadline. I know you mentioned there's a couple of competitive opportunities that are on the horizon, especially related to these two funding opportunities. What's kind of next, and can you kind of give us a 6 month down the line look at funding opportunities and areas of interest for OLDCC?
Sure. So where we are right now in the fiscal year, it's July, and the federal fiscal year ends at the end of September. So at this point, we are generally subscribed for all of the funding that we were appropriated for fiscal year 2022. Now we are looking at fiscal year 2023, and I'm using air quotes here, normal circumstances, we would have a budget in place by October 1, and so we would know how much we would have for different program activities, and we would start to work with communities to prepare grant applications. And in anticipation of that, we'd also start to line up our competitive programs, the notices of funding opportunity, in preparation for that. That said, I'm not sure that anyone is assuming we will have a fiscal year 2023 budget in place by October 1. And so, you ask what I anticipate over the next 6 months. I think over the next 6 months, we're going to be waiting to see how much money we're going to have in 23 to make grants. That said, we continue to make, particularly our eligibility-based grants, even absent a definite appropriation, because we will have hopefully a continuing resolution that would represent what the president's budget, well, actually would represent what we were appropriated last year, but we would try and corroborate that with what was at least put in the president's budget. And what I can say is that we are planning on probably disproportionately larger investments in diversification and resilience as we go into FY23. We likewise expect that at least the Defense Community Infrastructure Program is going to be funded again. The president's budget included funding for that for FY23, and based on what we see in Congress, the Senate Armed Services Committee National Defense Authorization Act draft actually just was released over the past several days, and that included funding for the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. For the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, it's a little bit unknown. That's a program that has traditionally been funded by the appropriators without the department asking for that funding, and we just haven't seen that yet in the bill. But we're hopeful that we will be able to continue the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program in FY23. So as we move beyond the fiscal year 22 year, we will start to prepare our notices of funding opportunity in anticipation of both of those programs, the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, as well as a couple of the eligibility-based programs.
Thanks. Are National Guard facilities considered installations for funding purposes?
Generally, and I say that because while they are considered military installations, they would have to be a National Guard facility that is subject to federal use. And so one of the ways that a local community can verify that is to ensure that there is a Department of Defense lease interest in that. In other words, Department of Defense federal funds could be used for improvements or some sorts of investments there to ensure that the federal mission could be supported. So I've in most instances, especially at the National Guard level, yes, you do see that they are eligible for actually not as a direct recipient of funds, but the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program. I have seen a number of times funds used to enhance facilities at National Guard installations based on that federalized use.
Great. Those are the questions that we have. Do you mind if I put your email in the chat so that folks can follow up with you if they need to?
Sure, by all means. And anyone who navigates to oldcc.gov should be able to also submit questions or requests through the input boxes there.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it's always good to have a face and a name. So, or at least a name in this case. I know that you guys have camera limitations, so I appreciate everyone participating and asking questions throughout today's presentation. I put Daniel's information in the chat. Any final remarks, Daniel?
Nope. Again, just appreciation for what everyone's doing here. Please do reach out and let me know if I can be of assistance.
Fantastic. I'll wrap up just as a reminder with the summit coming up here in October. You can find more information at summit.universityeda.org. Thanks for joining us today for today's presentation with Daniel and OLDCC, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Thanks. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Tim.